course, I'm joined by Nigel Farage, the big man. So, Nigel, quick reaction to the Lib Dems. Do you think they were doing some tactical voting?
I think there's a non-aggression pact with Labour in place. Really clear. One thing that Davey is not doing is attacking Starmer at all, and vice versa. So you can see what the pattern's going to be. You know, in Surrey constituencies, places like that, Jeremy Hunt's seat, for example, you know, Labour will put in almost zero effort, leave it to the Lib Dems, and it'll go the other way in parts of the East and West Midlands, I suspect. So that's pretty clear. I mean, look, I have to say, I think Sir Ed Davey is one of the least inspiring political leaders I've ever seen. Mind you, there is some competition around these days. But despite that, they'll probably get a low percentage of the overall vote, but they might up their seats quite considerably.
And they'll be going for those Tory Shire seats, of course, the NIMBY seats. Well, GB News' political correspondent Catherine Forster spoke with Sir Keir Starmer earlier on about how the Labour Party are going to tackle the current Channel crisis.
We absolutely have to stop the boats. There's no question about that. We shouldn't have anybody making that dangerous journey across the Channel. And the government has lost control of the borders. Record numbers have come already this year under Sunak's leadership. So we've got to get to grips with that. No country can lose control of its borders, and that will be a priority. I think that the first thing we need to do is to smash the gangs that are running the vile trade and putting people in boats in the first place.
Okay, Nigel, before we move on to that explosive interview with Trevor Phillips, any reaction there to Sir Keir Starmer talking tough on stopping the boat?
Yeah, we've been trying to smash the drugs gangs now for decades. And every single year we have to admit that we haven't succeeded at all, that illegal drugs are being sold more heavily by gangs in this country than ever before, and indeed all over the world. And you can smash the gangs if you want to. Makes no difference. You think about it. You've got a criminal trafficking gang in Calais making between 2 and 3 million euros a week. You can bring them a death penalty. There'll still be people queuing up to conduct that trade. Starmer is offering literally nothing whatsoever. You could argue that at least the Conservatives have tried with the Rwanda plan, though sadly the ECHR court decided it wasn't to be. But no, Starmer is offering nothing whatsoever. And in fact, I have to say, it's so dull listening to him that it's quite difficult to sort of hold the argument. There's no substance of any kind on anything.
He maintains that stopping the criminal gangs is the answer, going down line and not bothering about controlling our own border in Britain.
Well, he's making that argument. He's also talking about a deal with the EU, which may mean even more people finish up coming here than before. Smashing the gangs does not work. It's impossible. They will always be replaced. The point is, the reason people come is they know they won't be sent back, and they've got every chance of being waved through in 2 or 3 years' time, the refugee system. I mean, goodness knows why we allow so many in, but we do. So Starmer's wrong. This is our fault. The gangs are only there because we allow people to stay. Starmer will do nothing, and Rishi's plan's going to fail as well. OK,
now let's turn to the main event, the reaction to that interview yesterday on Sky News with Trevor Phillips. It's fair to say, once again, you've put the cat amongst the pigeons. This time you address really what many are considering to be the big elephant in the room, and that is what you perceive as a lack of integration of British Muslims, some of them, with British values. Tell us more.
Yeah, I mean, look, the point I'm making is there is a very deep sense of unease in the country. You know, you see a Green Party local politician elected in Leeds just screaming "Allo Akbar." I think that's a bit odd. You see supporters of a victorious candidate in Leeds saying "We're coming to get you." And the polling that was done by JL Partners a few weeks ago, the most alarming statistic was this: amongst 18 to 24-year-old young Muslims living in Britain, 23% said they supported the concept of jihad. Now, I put it to you, that is not a British value. It is a failure of integration. And for all the talk we had from Blair, from Mandelson, about diversity, this isn't diversity. You're finishing up with whole areas of our towns and cities that are completely unrecognisable as being English. And I think that's undeniable. So all I was stating was a deep sense of unease. And that's why, you know, for Rishi Sunak as Prime Minister to be allowing 1.2 million people a year to settle here, I think integration on that scale is literally impossible. So Labour started it, the Conservatives have made it worse. Now, the reaction, of course, there are those that will scream and shout. There are those that will say it's Islamophobic or it's racist. Well, I just think when they use words like that, it's because they don't want to have the debate. They don't want to talk about it. They're losing the argument. I can tell you that if you look on GB News' website, you look at national newspaper websites and see the reaction from Joe Public, it's been overwhelmingly in support.
There has been a lot of criticism, as you'd expect, and you would have known that was coming. Zahra Mohammed, who's the Secretary-General of the Muslim Council of Britain, she said, so horribly Islamophobic and racist, doing what Farage does best, reinforcing his hate-filled rhetoric of misinformation. What would be your response to that?
She doesn't want to debate. If she wants to come and sit with me on a panel and debate this, then she's more than welcome to. And of course, I was talking about this, and it is a minority, but the worry, Martin, is it's a growing minority, particularly since the events of October the 7th in Gaza, that are espousing views. I mean, goodness me, there's a chap the other day wearing a Hamas shirt, walking down a London street, people chanting intifada on the streets of London 2 weeks ago. I think it's pretty obvious to everybody that something is going very, very badly wrong.
Why do you think it is? We would expect those who are older, more entrenched in traditional conservative Muslim values, may be less integrated. The concerning thing about this, Nigel, as you said, younger people seem to be more radicalised. What's driving that? Is it social media? Is it the environment they're steeped in? Why are younger Muslims seemingly more against British values?
What is happening in some of those Muslim communities, particularly in northern towns and cities, is they are achieving the lowest educational results of any particular group. There are even health problems in some of those groups, highest levels of welfare dependency of any group in the country. And it's in an environment like that, where people aren't progressing, they're not moving forwards, that bad ideas thrive.
But of course, the Muslim Council of Britain would say, well, that's because they're left behind. That's because they've been abandoned by policymakers. They need help, not to be attacked.
No, I think the fact is, I mean, goodness me, on this channel, the number of Muslim lawyers and business people that we have on talking about things that have got their own private observance of religion, but are a fully integrated part of the community. And you can see this with the Jewish community, you can see it with the Hindu community, where people have different origins and faiths, but we have commonality and we all get on. This is a particular problem in Islam. It is a minority, but it's a growing minority. And if we don't talk about it, we're going to finish up with sectarian politics, with people voting along religious lines in a very big way. And I'm old enough to remember what sectarian politics did in Northern Ireland. I don't want to see anything like that in England. Okay,
we'll be debating that in much more detail later on the show. I want to ask you about a dramatic event today, and that is Lucy Allen, the Conservative MP for Telford, has come out and endorsed the Reform Party candidate, Alan Adams. Did you know that was going to happen, and how surprised are you by that?
Not very surprised at all. I mean, obviously, Lee Anderson was one that left the Conservatives and joined Reform. There are dozens of Conservative MPs who agree with Reform's agenda far more than their own. They know that Rishi won't stop the boats. They know that the Conservatives have lied, and I mean lied, in every single manifesto since 2010 about legal migration, which has now reached these record numbers. So there's a lot of disaffection in that wing of the Conservatives, and I wouldn't be surprised if there weren't more Lucy Allens in the next couple of weeks.
She's been suspended from the party. You're expecting her membership to be terminated? She'll be persona non grata? She'll be put out to seed?
I wouldn't think Lucy Allen would really care, because, she stood and was elected for a Conservative party that she believed in, and she, like millions of us, feels betrayed by them.
And she's calling Alan Adams the next Member of Parliament for Telford. Do you think she'll campaign or help fundraise even?
Well, it does sound like it, doesn't it? It does sound like she's absolutely foursquare behind the Reform candidate, who I don't know, but I believe is a very, very good chap. Look, the fact is, we're in a bizarre situation. The vast majority, 70% of Conservative voters want pretty much a freeze on immigration, or numbers down to very, very low numbers. And what they've got is a government giving us 750,000 a year. And I mentioned yesterday in that Trevor interview that the other, my really biggest part of the interview, we are living through a population explosion caused by British politicians that is damaging the quality of life of every single person in this country. We are becoming poorer because of it. Our lifestyles, we can't get GP appointments, our kids can't get houses. And just think about this. even if you go for the net figure, not the gross, it's a migrant a minute. A migrant a minute coming into this country under a Conservative government, far more than even Tony Blair gave us years ago. We've got to provide a new house, a new dwelling, one every 2 minutes, just to cope with this influx. It is impossible. And I think for far too long, Tory and Labour have done their best not to talk about this. They've no intention of discussing this in a general election. And that's why I'm helping Richard Tice. We need to have this debate. And frankly, they need to be held accountable.
And talking of which, tomorrow morning, you're at Dover. You're having a Reform Party press conference. Dover, of course, talismanic in the illegal immigrants arriving. But also, you seem fully square behind the idea of making this an immigration election. Can you give us a sneak preview of what we might expect to hear at Dover tomorrow?
4 years ago, I was going out into the English Channel, filming small boats coming, predicting that if we didn't deal with it, you may as well put a sign on the White Cliffs of Dover, everyone welcome. And I said there would be an invasion. I was called all the names under the sun for daring to use that word. Well, since that time, 3,800 boats have come, 125,000 people have come, most of them young men, undocumented young males. I think that poses a very serious potential security risk to this country, particularly in the wake of what's happened on October the 7th and what is going on in Gaza. And I'm going to expose tomorrow the fact that Rishi can't stop the boats. Starmer hasn't got a clue. I shall put down tomorrow exactly what we need to do to succeed in the way that Tony Abbott did when he was Prime Minister of Australia and stop the boats coming from Indonesia.
Operation Sovereign Borders, of course, was the only big success on this issue anywhere
ever
on the planet. Finally, there's all talk of a Blair-style wipeout. How bad, how severe do you think the forest fire is going to be that hits the Conservative Party and the child remains that are left, Nigel? Are you going to help in some way try and rebuild conservatism in Britain?
Well, not under this Conservative Party leadership. I mean, they've absolutely burnt the house down. They've lost trust. They've lost faith. They are, I mean, really, people's feelings towards the Conservative Party, particularly 2019 voters who perhaps had never voted for the party before, are unrepeatable. Live on air, ahead of the watershed, people are very, very upset. I don't know how bad the loss is going to be, but I just sense that the Sunak campaign thus far is a disaster. He talks about bold leadership, but he looks like a frightened rabbit. And even the National Service Pledge, when you start to unpick it, only applies to 30,000 people a year. That would be 1 in 26 of the 18-year-olds in this country. The rest will be asked to do just 25 hours a year of voluntary service. None of it's working. And I think they're in danger, actually, of spiralling downwards.
And where do you think those 30,000 might live? The Bibby Stockholm? RAF Scamper?
I've absolutely no idea. And who would train them? Yeah. Given that the British Army has gone from 100,000 men to 75,000 men, morale's at an all-time low, you couldn't do any form of national service without a massive increase in the army. What Sunak should be saying is, we need 30,000 of you to volunteer to join the army proper.
And actually incentivise it. Nigel Farage, always a pleasure. Thank you very much for joining us on your own show. I'm delighted to stand in for.